video is to demonstrate what I want you to do for paper sewing practice. We'll be doing this with an unthreaded machine. So you can see I've removed the bobbin. There's also no thread in the machine. The needle is not threaded. This machine does not have the bobbin case cover on right now. You don't need to take yours off. In fact, you should leave it on. I just have this off to show there's no bobbin in here. So the first of the practice papers that you'll be using for your paper sewing is this straight lines paper. Now, if you don't have a printer and so you can't print the practice sheets, you can certainly just take a piece of paper and draw some straight lines on it with a ruler. The objective here is just to learn to practice controlling the machine, controlling your speed, and also to practice starting and stopping where you need to, which as we progress through the other skills, you'll see why that's really important. So the first thing we need to do, we want to make sure that we're starting where the line starts. And so first of all, we need our presser foot to be up, which it is up, but if it wasn't, I have the lifter back here. I could lift it. And then we also need to make sure the needle is up so that we can slide the paper under like we would with fabric. If the needle is not up, you use your hand wheel. Remember, turning it only ever toward you, never away from you. And you could turn your hand wheel until the needle came up out of the way. So once the needle is up, we start to position the paper underneath, and then we turn the hand wheel, and we're just trying to put the tip of the needle into the beginning of the line. It can be really disorienting at first to try to see what's going on under your presser foot. So there may be some trial and error here, but you will get the hang of it eventually. So once the needle is in place, and that's holding your start spot, then you can lower your foot, which is going to hold the paper in place. And if we were really sewing, it would be holding the fabric in place. And then we just push the pedal, and we're going to sew forward only a few stitches. So the needle's going to go down and up into the paper 4 or 5 times. Okay, then we stop. We press the reverse button, which you remember is here on the front of the machine, and we'll hold that reverse button in the whole time that we want to sew backward. And then we will reverse. Now we need to be careful to do that only a few stitches. Because we want to secure the beginning of our seam, and that back stitch works the same way tying a knot when we hand sew would work. But we want to make sure when we back stitch that we don't go back past the start of that line. So now we have started sewing, we've reversed to back stitch, and we're going to continue the rest of the way down the seam. And you can see I'm using the center of the foot to help me line up the center position of my needle so that I'm on the line. Now I will tell you, when we look at this after, it may be slightly crooked because I'm looking at this from several inches further away than I typically would, so that I can stay behind the camera and so my head isn't here blocking what you're looking at. So please forgive me if it's not a perfectly straight line when we look at this afterwards. So you'll see as you get close to the end here, you want to slow down and eventually stop completely. And you're going to use the hand wheel to do these last couple of stitches And we're doing this so we have more control. So I can stop exactly where I want to. So we'll turn our hand wheel a few times. And you'll see once you're doing this on your own, it doesn't always land perfectly with the last hole, the last point of the needle ending perfectly at the end of the line. Sometimes the length of the line and the length of the stitches doesn't work out to a perfect stop, and that's fine. You just get as close as you can. And then again, we're going to hold down the reverse button. We're going to stitch backward 3 or 4 stitches. We'll use our hand wheel to raise the needle up out of the paper. We'll raise our presser foot, and then we pull this out. Now, what I'll be looking for so that I can evaluate these if you are fully remote and you can't bring it in to show it to me, what I'll be looking for is that the spacing, if you can see this, the spacing of these holes is even and consistent. I can see that it's nice and straight and follows the line pretty closely. You'll notice I'm looking at this from the back. I can get a much better sense from the back of how you did and what you did. So when you send me photos, videos of your paper sewing, please send me the back as well as the front. And you can see where their holes are a little bit more defined here at the top and also at the bottom of the line, and that's showing me where you backstitched, so I know that you remembered to do it, and I know that you just did it for a small amount. I'm going to show you a couple of the common mistakes that we see a lot. One is pushing the paper through, because some of you will have the instinct to do that, not trusting the machine to do it for you. And so you can see when we do that, the holes start to rip. They become very close together. So that's one way I can tell that someone's been forcing the paper through the machine. Another issue that we see commonly is people that have their paper in a death grip because they're so nervous of the machine and the process and everything else that they just have a stranglehold on that paper. And you can see here how the line comes out looking just like a rip in the paper, and this is usually what we see when someone is holding the paper too tightly. So if you're pushing your paper through or you're holding your paper too tightly, you'll be able to see the spacing will be a little more off. And so what we're looking for is this nice consistent spacing. Remember that you want to set your machine up so that the stitch pattern is set to 2, which is the straight stitch, and the stitch length is set to 3, which is a pretty good average length stitch. So that's how you're going to do your paper sewing for straight lines, and I'll be putting up 3 more videos with the explanation for how to do the paper sewing for the other 3 skills. However, please make sure that I have seen your example of paper sewing for straight lines before you move on to square corners. I need to evaluate each step before you move on to the next one. Thanks and good luck.